Welcome. Thank you all so much for listening to Ensayne Comics. I'm your host, the insane one himself, Haiden Sayne. Hope everyone's having as nice a week as they can manifest. I hope I can help maybe facilitate the next one, maybe if not. My week has been mostly a bummer, to be honest, but it was enriched a few days ago when I read Lacey and Lily #1, which is an all-ages story about a young girl and her dog who get superpowers from Lacey's grandma's costume. It's a really easy read for young kids, and important for me, because even though it doesn't spend a ton of time on it, it does deal with the loss of a grandparent, which is especially poignant for me, because I lost my own grandmother in November, as I said before. Definitely not for every comic reader, but if you have a young person in your life who's new to comics or new to reading in general, I'd highly recommend it. I'm going to say this now, even though I failed at it plenty of times and probably will again. The goal at this moment is to get back to updating my comic strip Inept Odyssey on Monday, July 13th. So I'll be on the lookout for that as well, hopefully. Now, on this show, we've got some pretty neat stuff to take your mind off the horrors of the world, at least for a few minutes. And we got our book club selection, Halo Bloodlines, by Fred Van Lente and Francis Portela. And, of course, some news being relative in some cases, and new comic releases. So let's get started, shall we? First off, we have what I'm probably most excited about this week, Strange Academy #2, drawn by Humberto Ramos, written by Scotty Young, and published by Marvel. So I absolutely love that first issue of Strange Academy. If you don't know, this series is about Marvel's magic school. So imagine the X-Mansion meets Hogwarts, and it's set in New Orleans, which is just magical. The first issue was so cool to me because I believe it's easily accessible to new readers. I mean, you can give this to anyone who likes fantasy stories, but not necessarily a Marvel fan. And at the same time, if you are a hardcore Marvel zombie, there's really cool ingredients I think you could dig. I mean, we got a couple of Asgardian kids and a frost giant, the son of Dormammu, Brother Voodoo's a teacher, and of course Doctor Strange is the headmaster or whatever. And a bunch of other little nuggets from the Marvel Universe, so that's really cool. Not to mention that Scotty Young and Humberto Ramos are a perfect team. They complement each other so well. So, it's all good stuff, and I'm really excited to read this next one. I actually plan on going to my local shop, Cool Comics, in Valdosta, for this one, because while I normally read digital comics, I think I'd love to have a print version of this. So hopefully that'll happen very shortly, maybe tomorrow or the next day. Another #2 that came out this week, Adventure Man, written by Matt Fraction, with art by Rachel and Terry Dodson. Now, if you didn't hear me talking about it before, Adventure Man is partly a pastiche take on the classic pulp character Doc Savage, and is also a story, with the main protagonist Claire Connell, a reader of Adventure Man, whose life eventually starts to intersect with the world of Adventure Man. I'm really interested in reading more of this, especially since this merging of the fictional and real worlds gives me a Vertigo vibe, a la Fables, Unwritten, and such. Definitely a pickup for me. Next is Archangel 8, #3, drawn by C.P. Smith, scribed by Michael Morisi, and published by AWA Studios Upshot. So I actually had no idea that I had missed the second issue of this series. I read #1 a little while back, and of course many comic publishers, especially the smaller ones, weren't putting out any new books during the first couple months of the pandemic. So I must have just lost track of AWA's release schedule. Really dug that first issue's premise, which seems to combine like military spec ops or mercenary stuff with biblical angels, and the art was really beautiful. Thought I'd read this summary that they provided for #3. In a world beyond the sights of mortals, heaven and hell wages war for the souls of mankind. Principal among God's legions are 7 archangels written about in the religious texts for millennia. But there's an 8th angel, known only from passing illusions in Apocrypha, who operates under a different code. Fighting without God's sanction, he faces the enemy on his own terms, and shows just how bad good can be. So, super excited to get back to this world with number 2 and number 3. Now, very interestingly, my last 2 picks for the week are both spawned from the works of Edgar Rice Burroughs, although licensed separately to 2 different publishers. From Dynamite Entertainment, Deja Thoris number 6, written by Dan Abnett, with art by Sebastian Perez. So from my understanding, Dynamite seems to have the license to characters related to Burroughs' John Carter of Mars series. Now, I'm only peripherally aware of John Carter. I really enjoyed that Disney film from a few years ago, and I actually did recently start reading Princess of Mars, which is the first novel in that Barsoom series. Comics-wise, I read Deja Thoris in a single issue of a series called Swords of Sorrow, which is a cool series that united a bunch of female characters published by Dynamite. Which reminds me that last week I said I hadn't read any Vampirella before, but she appeared in that too, so there you go, I have read some Vampirella. The major pull here for me is Dan Abnett. I love pretty much everything he's ever written, especially when he collaborated with Andy Lanning on stuff like Legion, Hypernaturals, and of course Guardians of the Galaxy. I expect to go back and read this series as well as other Barsoom media. Lastly, from American Mythology Productions, Monster Men Heart of Wrath number 1. Art by Roy Allen Martinez and written by Mike Wolfer, who's also the editor-in-chief of American Mythology. Very interesting. So American Mythology seems to have the rights to all the other Edgar Rice Burroughs works, except for maybe Tarzan, which I believe Dark Horse officially has the rights to. But since these characters are still technically public domain, other publishers like Dynamite have also put out some Tarzan in recent years. But then again, I think Edgar Rice Burroughs Inc. actually sued them, so who knows. Very interesting stuff. Anyway, American Mythology was actually my introduction to Burroughs' work. They released a free little sampler comic for Halloween Comic Fest a couple years ago, and that showcased stories from what they're calling the ERB universe, with titles such as Moon Maid, The Land That Time Forgot, Perlecutor, or Perlecutor, however you say that, and Carson of Venus, which were all really neat and got me interested in Burroughs stuff, so that's cool. Now, this Heart of Wrath comic is apparently a direct sequel to another Burroughs novel called Monster Men, and a one-shot comic also from American Mythology. Well, I would probably personally like to read the novel first. The idea of doing a sequel to something in a different medium is really neat to me. Apparently, the Watchmen HBO series is a good example of that from what I hear. Honorable mention this week is Lacey and Lily number 2. The Girl and Her Dog superhero comic that I was talking about earlier. I guess that one's going to be weekly. Alright, that does it for the books I'm interested in this week. Hopefully I can make it out to my shop pretty soon. For now, let's go over a couple of news topics. Probably the biggest comic news of the past week is that Marvel Comics has acquired the publishing rights to Alien, Predator, and naturally Aliens vs. Predator. Dark Horse has lost quite a few licenses ever since Disney first acquired Lucasfilm and then 20th Century Fox. Now, some series like Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Firefly were relicensed to Boom Studios, but a bigger property like Star Wars went to Marvel, and now that seems to be the case for Aliens and Predator. I think this is a great idea, especially considering how good the Marvel Star Wars comics have been. No idea about Conan the Barbarian, but I am interested in eventually reading that stuff as well. They haven't announced anything yet, but I would love for some crossovers to come out of this. DC has been putting out a ton of crossovers in the past few years, like JL Power Rangers, Batman Ninja Turtles, and so on. And even though Disney owns so much, they don't really do that with Marvel. I mean, even when you have stuff in-house, like Star Wars. I mean, how neat would Star Wars, Guardians of the Galaxy, or other Marvel cosmic characters be? What I've really been wanting, ever since there were even talk of a Fox Disney acquisition, is a Stormtroopers versus Alien comic. Yeah, that's a big yes for me. Make it so. Well, that's the wrong franchise. Anyways. I'd even take a Marvel Universe crossover with AvP. But even if there isn't, there's still more than likely be more eyes on a Marvel comic than a Dark Horse. That's just the facts. And Dark Horse, by the way, still has the publishing rights to James Cameron's Avatar, which is also a Fox property, so that's neat. I mean, illegal stuff, man. I gotta love it. And comic movie news, just after Michael Keaton's talks to return to the role of Batman, we have a rumor that Ben Affleck will also be reprising his take on the character. That means we could potentially have 3 Batmen, Keaton, Affleck, and don't forget about Pattinson, in movies around the same time. Now, on one hand, I'm not really a big Bats fan. There's so many more DC heroes I would feel more deserving of a film adaptation. But on the other hand, the idea that DC is basically making a live-action multiverse is really appealing to me. One, because I love seeing multiple takes on characters, but it also frees up DC and AT&T Warner Brothers from the mess that they've made while they're trying to establish a cinematic universe the past few years. I also think that Affleck is definitely the best live-action Batman we've ever gotten, even though he's been underserved by those 2 movies he's been in, for sure. It would also be exciting to see these parallel Batmen meet on screen in the future. I don't know if that's, the plan or what, but, anything's possible, man, and that in and of itself is very exciting. The next one is not new, but it just came to my attention this week, and it also involves a crossover, and even takes us back to Edgar Rice Burroughs. American Mythology Productions will be putting out a comic in October that not only includes the ERB universe, but also another classic character that they had the publishing rights to. Zorro in the Land That Time Forgot is a 3-part limited series coming. Now, I don't know the Land of That Time Forgot, other than the short excerpt I read in that Halloween Comic Fest I mentioned, but I love Zorro, and I think putting him in an otherworldly setting is a really neat idea. Now, I haven't read any of American Mythology Zorro comics. I think I've read Matt Wagner's Dynamite stuff the most, and I highly recommend, but I really appreciate they put a little corner box on the cover of this thing that celebrates Zorro's centennial, which I thought would have been more widely talked about last year, considering that Zorro is a popular icon. He turned 100 last year, 1919, 2019. I also thought that the 100th year of Zorro would have been a good time to put out that Z movie that's been in production since forever. I mean, it's supposed to be like a futuristic take on Zorro, like a dystopian, which I didn't like initially, but now it's kind of growing on me. I take it. Now, the writer of Zorro in the Land That Time Forgot, and EIC of American Mythology, Mike Wolfer, I did a Facebook Live a few days ago talking about the book, so that's something pretty fun if you're interested in checking that out. Now, just a few hours before recording, Image Comics released a little teaser that was just a picture of 3 dots with the word crossover. Now, I have no idea what those dots might be referencing. I know people are speculating about it, and apparently Donny Cates may have shared the same thing. But I personally feel like it might be a crossover with another publisher instead of titles put out by Image, since I don't remember them doing a tease like that for something like Outer Darkness 2. Now, True definitely will be a book club one day, so don't forget that. Maybe it's a huge company-wide crossover, maybe. Though I'm sure that might be a legal hassle, since it's all creator-owned. And the closest thing we've gotten to something like that I'm aware of anyway, was Scotty Young's I Hate Image, which was amazing. Have his character Gertrude from I Hate Fairyland just like going around like killing different characters like from Saga, Walking Dead, some of the classics like Shadowhawk, and she even meets the founders of Image Comics. But anyway, either way, I'm totally excited for whatever is announced, and since much of this new segment has been about crossovers, I had to include that. And finally, in some gaming news, Microsoft revealed the date for their Xbox Series X first-party game showcase, which will be on July 23rd at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. It'll be neat to see what they got going first-party-wise, since, the last gen with Xbox One certainly disappointed in that department. But most importantly to me, this will be the gameplay reveal of Halo Infinite, which is my reason for being, guys, and super stoked for that game. They also announced that Halo 3 will be releasing on PC via the Master Chief Collection on July 14th. So PC players can finally finish the fight after 13 years. By the way, 2007, amazing year for video games. I mean, Halo 3, Call of Duty 4, GTA 4, Assassin's Creed, God of War 2, Uncharted, and so on. That's just a legendary year. Now, coincidentally, this Halo stuff also ties into my book club selection for the week. So after a quick break, join me for a discussion on Halo Bloodline. Oh, sorry. welcome back to Ensayne Comics Book Club. Each week I pick a run, OGN, limited series, or even a single issue that I love and share my thoughts on it. You can add your opinions by commenting on my book club post on the Ensayne Comics Facebook and Instagram pages. Maybe eventually Twitter. One day, I don't know. I haven't gotten too much engagement with other accounts on Twitter in the past, but we shall see. For next week, we'll be reading the first volume of Fables, Legends and Exiles, with a guest for a change. My good buddy Logan Cone, aka Leg Hair on YouTube, will be joining me to talk about that classic. So I'm excited to get his opinions on that book. This week, I reread the limited series Halo Bloodline. Not to be confused with Halo Bad Blood, which is a prose novel that I hope to read maybe in the next couple months or so. We'll see. Bloodline was drawn by Francis Portela, written by one of my favorite scribes in the bits, Fred Van Lente, and published by Marvel Comics. So, as I've mentioned before, and probably will many times, especially as we approach Infinite, I'm a hardcore fan of Halo. Every aspect, the single-player campaign, the competitive multiplayer, the creative Forge mode, where you can get to make your own maps and game types and stuff. Not to mention all the brand extension that's been done, like novels, toys, various video content. You know, some people only come for one or two of those things, and that's cool. But to me, anything from that franchise has something to offer, and I just love digging into it. Halo Bloodline has all the usual trappings that make for a cool Halo story. We got Spartans, we got AI, we got Covenant, we got crash landings, mystery, and betrayal. But what separates Bloodline from other extended lore is that it deals with mental issues, and at its core, most of it is a story about family and how we love and hurt each other, basically. If you're unfamiliar with Halo, I figured I'd give you just a brief background on Spartans, although one of the cool things about this book is that it does find time to weave a little of that stuff in when possible. So, the Spartan generation that our protagonists are from, as is John 117, aka Master Chief, that's the hero of the video games, are armor-wielding super soldiers who were kidnapped around the age of 6 to be the elite fighting force of the UEG, or Unified Earth Governments of the 26th century, rather. And that's wild, of course. They don't really get into it in this one, but if you're interested in seeing the consequences of that, terrible thing, kidnapping kids, I highly recommend the Kilo 5 trilogy. Not a lot of fans. Well, I say not a lot. There's a large number of fans who don't appreciate those novels, but I love it, especially since it's written by Karen Traviss, who, if you are a fan of Star Wars Republic Commando, she did those novels. It's really good. Anyway, probably not by coincidence, the real Spartan warriors of Greece were thought to have been trained from the age of 6 as well, so that's pretty cool. I mean, not cool for them. I mean, it's cool that they they made that connection. I always thought that the Spartan ones in Halo were actually the real Greek Spartans, but we learned there's actually another program that preceded the Spartan 2s, which is the Spartan 2s being Black Team and Master Chief's class, if you will. The Spartan 1s they're talked about a little bit as Project Orion, which includes Sergeant Johnson, if you played those games. So he was like a proto-Spartan. Now, the 2s were originally created to take on the insurrectionists, which were separatists who sought to leave the UEG. And there's some cool stories featuring insurrectionists. One of them being Killer 5, so go check that out. But anyways, so they're dealing with the rebels, basically. But before long, humanity is attacked by the religious fanatic assortment of aliens called the Covenant. And that's a cool thing, like, they deal with, like, propaganda. Like, they kind of hid the Spartans until after the Covenant attacked. So a lot of people assume that they were a response to the aliens attacking, but that's not the case. Pretty cool stuff. A lot of interesting stuff looking at propaganda stuff. It's like, the good guys can be viewed as bad sometimes. So it's pretty cool. Not really in the games, but in other media. Now, the Spartan 2s are broken up into teams designated by color. So you have Blue Team, which was Master Chief's team. Red Team, which includes Jerome, Ashley, and Douglas from the Halo Wars games, the spin-off games, if you ever played those. And, of course, Black Team, who are the focal group of Bloodline. Now, what's interesting right off the bat is how the members of Black Team are referred to in this story. While most Spartans are called by their names or number, i.e. Master Chief is John or John 117, or occasionally Sierra 117, which stands for Spartan 117. Black Team primarily only use their number within the team itself, so Black 1, Black 2, 3, and 4, with 1 being the leader of the team, like Joan and Jerome are Blue 1 and Red 1, respectively. In fact, the only member who is named, at least that I can remember, is Black 4, whose real name is Victor 101. I say real name, but they took their last names. That's a little weird thing, too. They go by numbers instead of their surname. So Black Team's original mission in this tale is only briefly mentioned in a text piece briefing at the beginning of the comic, which is kind of neat from a lore perspective, because it's consistent with in format with briefings in other Halo media. That being said, I don't usually remember what they say, and that's true for this one, except for I think about there's something about them wearing civilian clothes, kind of going undercover, and then a little bit about the Cole Protocol, which is an order by the United Nations Space Command, or UNSC, which is the military force of the UEG. A lot of numbers and acronyms and stuff. Sorry. And that basically states that in the event of a capture, a human vessel must self-destruct to prevent the Covenant from accessing their data and finding Earth. Really interesting. Now, fortunately for Black Team, they don't have to worry about that, because theirs, along with a Covenant ship in their vicinity, crash land on an unknown installation. Now, from here, I'm not going to give you a beat-by-beat recap, but rather point out some of my favorite aspects of this story. Now, first and foremost, Portella's art, coupled with colors by Ulysses Areola, make for absolutely gorgeous rendering of the Halo universe. And I would say that Bloodline may actually have my favorite art in any Halo comic book that I've ever read. That first full-page splash of the team after awakening from cryosleep is just iconic in my mind, and like all Spartans should be. And it creates a precedent for many more beautiful images all throughout the book. A neat storytelling device that Van Lente and Portella use is a time contrast kind of thing. Basically what I mean by that is we'll see the Spartans in an image in the present with full armor, and then in the next panel we'll see them blocked and framed, if you will, theater and movie making terms, in the same exact position, but several years in the past during their training, and most importantly without their armor. Now, it's a common idea that Spartans are almost always depicted with their helmets on, with their face fully obstructed. I mean, we never actually see Master Chief's face. That's one of the interesting, one of the most iconic things about, one of many iconic things about that series. In gaming history, that we never see his face, except for, at least in the games, I think that we might see him in, the Fall of Reach comic and the animated adaptation. But in the games, we don't, except for, one time we see his eyes in the special legendary ending of Halo 4, which, if you haven't played them, most of them, not, maybe not all of them, most of them, if you beat the game in the hardest difficulty, there's a little bit of extra ending. Pretty cool. Now, I feel these contrasting panels were used not only to be utilized for flashbacks, but also to have the Spartans emote even when they have their armor on, which also makes them indistinguishable. God, English, very good. Makes them indistinguishable from each other because they have the exact same armor. These flashbacks also are used in a surreal way, where we see the young versions of the characters doing something that the present-day version is. So, for instance, someone points a gun at one of the Spartans in one scene, and we see him in one panel in his armor as he is. That's what he's wearing at the time. But then we see a panel of him as a young man, and with his no helmet and his training outfit, whatever. But his dialogue is from the future. He's saying what is being said then, but to us he looks like his old self. And it's really a neat device that I think might work better in a comic or in the comic medium than perhaps it would on film. This also helps with one of the surprises in the story, when one of the Spartans removes their helmet in the present, because there's a visual thing. It's really cool, really cool. Now, the core of this story, with super soldiers and aliens, is family. Black Team has been training and operating together since they were kids, and as such, have developed close bonds to each other, often referring to each other as brothers and sisters. However, there also seems to have been some romantic love between some of them, at least when they were teenagers, and that spawns some jealousy in other members that comes to blows in the present day story, and I won't spoil that. You have to check that out. Now, this theme of family is also explored in two elites from the Covenant. Now, the elites are Sayne, as they're referred to themselves. So the elites is like a human name given to them, and Sayne is their real name, their real species name. And they're one of probably the coolest and most recognizable, I would say, enemy types in the Halo series. And they kind of like an amalgamation of Alien and Predator, which ties us back to earlier talk in the episode. These two elites, Ref and Thawne, are actually blood, but they're actual brothers. And we see some quick flashbacks to their youth, which is really neat. How like a lot of this stuff, hardcore people might already know, but they weave in a little stuff that maybe we haven't seen visually. It's just maybe since we've seen. So that's pretty cool about how the elites grow up. Now, Spartans and elites are kind of meant to be equals in terms of the lore and gameplay wise. There's moments where you play as an elite and it's meant to play the same exact way as you would as a Spartan. And in competitive mode, when you have elites, playable elites, remember those days? A little nod for the Halo fans. You're supposed to be even with the Spartan. And this brief history that we're shown seems to be true. As young as Sayne have to defend themselves at a young age or die. Now, the arc of their relationship is the Ref and Thawne is really interesting. And you have to check out what happens. It's really interesting. And it juxtaposes very nicely with the bond of the Spartans. And it's also neat, for some of the story, Thawne, the elder brother, actually works side by side with the Spartans for a time. That's pretty cool. I really like, so they're enemies. Eventually in the games, some of the elites leave the Covenant. And some of them actually become allies to humans. And I really like the idea of like Spartans or not necessarily Spartans, but humans and elites working together because they're really cool. They're cool. And the last thing I want to talk about is an unreliance on what we're being shown in this book. So we learned that maybe some of the flashbacks that we've seen throughout this thing didn't exactly go down the way we were shown originally. If anybody's ever read the DC story Identity Crisis Classic, written by Brad Meltzer, forget who the artist is, I apologize, brother, or sister, you may remember something similar to that. There's a part where we see, I won't say who it is, but we see a fight and there's not a character there. And you're like, wait a second, I thought this guy was there. I thought it was a mistake. Like, I took a picture of it, put it on, like, Facebook or whatever a few years ago when I read it. I was like, this is a mistake. What the world? But then you keep reading, it's like, oh, I see. He was actually purged from the memories of these characters. When you see that the real memory, if you will, how things really happened. And that's the case with this. Maybe some characters were doing what they claimed other characters were doing. Very interesting. Now, the villain of this story, 686 Ebullient Prism, I believe is how I said, who is, if you're familiar with the games, is a contemporary, if you will, of a 343 Guilty Spark, which I just realized that Prism's number is the double of 343, 684, very interesting, or 686, what an idiot, it's right in my face, Jesus, that's pretty cool. Anyway, this guy's name, Ebullient Prism, affects some of the Spartans, heads-up displays. So it has them seeing things that aren't there or not what they appear. So he'll see an enemy, and it's actually an ally. Uh-oh, whoops, what are you attacking me for, bro? Betrayal. That makes for an interesting challenge for our heroes to overcome or not. And speaking of enemies, there's actually a completely unique enemy in this book that's like a tentacle robot thing. He's with the Ebullient Prism. Jeez. What a word. Very cool. It apparently means, like, very happy or something, which is completely wrong for 686. But this tentacle thing is we've never seen, at least in any video games, and I don't believe in any other media either. The books are nothing. Though I have to admit, I haven't read nearly enough of the Halo novels. I say I've read Fall of Reach, Kilo 5, the New Blood book, which if you've played Halo 3 ODST, there's a character in that. ODST is not get onto all this, I guess, but it's an elite Marine. Not saying Halo elite, but a Special Forces Marine, and he becomes a Spartan. Buck. This guy Buck, and so that's about that story. And I've also just read A Contact Harvest, which is about the very first interaction between humans, modern humans, and the Covenant. So I'm not sure. I don't think these technical guys have appeared before. But beautifully rendered by Portella and Company. So anyway, I highly recommend this story, especially if you are a Halo fan. I think it offers some interesting ideas and does neat things with the medium. Now, if you want to learn more about Spartans, you have to read Fall of Reach, like I mentioned. It's by Eric Nyland, and it was the very first Halo Prose novel that we got. And it's basically the spine of quite a bit of the Halo universe. Some of it has since been retconned to fit the overall lore, or, there's things like vehicle sizes that were just wrong, happen to be wrong because the Fall of Reach was being written at the same time as the very first Halo game was being made, so maybe they were getting a design for something that didn't work out or whatever, that kind of stuff. And they put out like 3 different editions of this book, I think, with changes made into it. Now, if you like Black Team, I actually would not recommend reading their next comic book appearance, as I feel they were used very poorly in that story. If you've read Halo Escalation, then you know what I mean, but so I'll leave it at that. And of course, play the games if you haven't, man. You gotta catch up before Infinite. I may actually do a series replay myself before it comes out. We'll see. I love the Halo Wars games, but I doubt I would play those just because they're a little more time consuming, the way I play anyway, because I turtle a lot, if you will, with getting resource management, which is fun, but I just don't think I would want to spend the time. I may go back and watch those cutscenes, though. Amazing, by Blur. They've done Halo Wars, most games now, seems like. The reboot of Modern Warfare. Pretty cool. But these are beautiful and did some really cool stuff with that story. A lot of us were disappointed by Halo 5, and Halo Wars 2 made me feel better about it's not like the most amazing story ever, but it just made me feel better about where things could be going. But I might play all the FPS games, so Halo Reach, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe not ODST. I may just do 1 through 5. Master Chief's games, if you want to say Halo 5 is. He's only got like 3 missions. But although, according to some of the stuff coming out, like the next book, there may be some dealings with Reach, so I may have to definitely want to read that new novel, and it comes out in a month or two. I have to see. I forget, Shadows of Reach, I believe it's called. Which just a little thing. So that original Fall of Reach cover, if you've ever seen it, this new Shadows of Reach kind of poses all the characters in the same way. So that's pretty cool. Even though they weren't necessarily meant to be those characters originally, they were just random Spartans. But anyway, that's pretty cool. So we'll see. Remember, we'll be reading Legends in Exile, the first volume of Fables created by Bill Willingham. He's got a few different artists. I know, I think it's Mike Buckingham does quite a bit of it, but I think there's some, like Steve Liliola, I already say his last name, might be in this one too. But anyway, Bill Willingham created it. Be sure to comment on the Ensayne Comics book club posts. That'll be on Facebook and Instagram, so look for that Fables post, and there'll probably be a picture of my boy Leg Hair, Logan Cohen. And there you can add your comment your thoughts, and they'll be added to the discussion. Until next time, I'm Haiden Sayne. Thank you so much for listening, and have a great week, and I hope you listen again.